Hey everyone, here is the video on critical appreciation of the introduction. The introduction is a poem by Kamla Das. We all know about her, that she is a confessional poet. Here we will cover the points first about the poet, then critical appreciation, and at last conclusion. So, Kamla Das was born on 31st March 1934 in Malabar district, Madras Presidency, British India, and she died on 31st of May 2009 at the age of 75 in Pune, Maharashtra, India. Her pen name was Madhvi Kutti, and by occupation she was a poet, a novelist, a short story writer. Her genre was poetry, novel, and short stories and memoirs. Notable works by her are Antikatha, My Story, The Descendants, and accept this as we are studying today, the introduction also. Notable awards by her to given to her are Sahitya Akademi Award, ASEAN World Prizes, Asian Poetry Prize, and Kant Award. One of the quote by her is here: I speak three languages, write in two, and dream in one. This is a very famous quote by Kamla Das, and it is frequently asked in exams that by whom these lines are written. I speak in three language, write in two, and dream in one. So this quote is by Kamla Das. Remember this thing. Next is the introduction. So we will cover all these points one by one as critical appreciation. First is overview. In an introduction, Das explores her complex emotions regarding the system controlling her life and the lives of countless suffering women. She also has the experience to back up her assertions about freedom and oppression, as she played a critical role in the establishment of the Indian feminist movement. So, this is overall, and next summary. In an introduction, Kamla Das describes the poet's own mental and emotional state as she aged and pushed back against patriarchal society. An introduction begins with the speaker Das stating that she knows all the male leaders of India. Their names are a part of her, a tribute to their overwhelming power. This contrasts significantly with the lack of power she felt growing up and getting married at 16. She struggles with her identity and is finally able to step away from the traditional role of wife. Das describes the way that men are able to move through the world with a solid identity. They are allowed their choices and emotions. In the last line, she pushes back against this way of life by stating that she feels things that do not belong to the man she loves. She too can be I here is denoting her own personality and her own identity. Next is themes. So the themes in the we will study here on this page the themes in an introduction. Thus explores powerful themes of feminism or equal rights, freedom, and marriage in an introduction. This poem is a very clear feminist statement that advocates for free choice for all women. This is in regards to every aspect of life, but the poet puts a special emphasis on marriage. She compares and contrasts the roles of men and women in society and explains for the reader how her life, the rules she has forced to obey, infringe on her freedom. Readers should be able to ask themselves why, while moving through the poem, how, if at all, the things Das is talking about apply to their own life. If nothing matches up, they might ask themselves why and if some kind of unaddressed or unacknowledged privilege is making their lives better. So these are the themes. Next is structure and form. An introduction is a 60-line poem that is contained with a single stanza. The lines range from 3 words up to 11 and do not follow a specific metrical pattern. Das also chose not to use a rhyme scheme. The lines also vary greatly in length and syllable number. This means that the poem is written in free verse. This style of writing allows the poet to explore various structure and make use of more sporadic rhymes. There are several examples of half rhyme and internal rhyme in an introduction. So this is structure and form. Next is literary devices. Kamla Das uses techniques such as enjambment, repetition, and anaphora. In an introduction, repetition and anaphora are seen at the beginnings of a number of lines such as 4 and 5. In this instance, the speaker is giving two conviction filled statements about who she is. This is conveyed through the repetition of the pronoun I. Later on, repetition is used again to define her language as both English and human. She is a human being as equal and valuable as any other. So these are the literary devices used. And next is thought content. See, thought content are divided in two parts. First is language of our thoughts, and next is patriarchal society. So firstly we will study language of our thoughts. The poetess, after discussing her indifferent attitude and distaste for the politics, goes on to articulate that she speaks in three languages, writes in two, and dreams in one. As I have told in previous slide also, that this is a quote by Kamla Das. So, as though dreams require a medium, the poetess echoes that the medium is not as significant as is the comfort level that one requires. The essence of one's thinking is the prerequisite to writing. Hence, she implores with all critics, friends, visiting cousins to leave her alone. The language that she speaks is essentially hers. The primary ideas are not a reflection but an individual impression. It is the distortions and queerness that makes it individual, and it is these imperfections that render it human. It is the language of her expression and emotions as it voices her joys, sorrows, and hopes. It comes to her life as cawing comes to the crows and roaring to the lions, and is therefore impulsive and instinctive. It is not the deaf, blind speech, though it has its own defects. It cannot be seen as a handicap. It is not unpredictable like the trees on storm or the clouds on rain. Neither does it echo the incoherent mutterings of the blazing fire. It possesses coherence of its own and emotional coherence. Then, next is patriarchal society. From the issue of the politics of language, the poetess passes on to the subject of sexual politics in an patriarchal dominated society where a girl attaining puberty is told about her biological changes by some domineering parental figure. As the girl seeks fulfillment of her adolescent passion, a young lover is forced upon her to traumatize and coerce the female body, since the same is site for patriarchy to display its power and authority. Where therefore she opts for male clothing to hide her femininity, the guardians enforce typical female attire with warnings to fit into the socially determined attributes of a woman. To become a wife and a mother and get confined to the domestic routine. She is threatened to remain within the four walls of her female space lest she should make herself a psychic or a manic. So, this is patriarchal society. Means this thought content is also followed in the poem. I have not mentioned here the whole poem, but you can google it. Actually, because see, I have mentioned all the criteria followed in a critical appreciation of any of the poem. So here we go with the next one, moral of the poem. So the poet presents crankiness, distority, honesty, and brutal frankness, and the tradition and culture of that time, and the earnest rebellion of a growing girl who was trapped in a time zone different from her mental time. The poetess has grown to see her rebellion in many a woman. The poetess, who is an individual woman, tries to voice an universal womanhood and tries to share her experience, good or bad, with all other women. Love and sexuality are strong component in her search for female identity, and the identity consists of polarities. Next is the use of sex imagery. As I have already told you that Kamla Das is a very confessional poet. So she has used some sex imagery as well in the poem. In the poem, the poetess gives us a vivid picture of how she grew from a child to an adult, becoming tall, with her limbs swelling or becoming bigger, or hair sprouting at one or two places in her body. Here, she also gives us a picture of her husband to whom she had just been married, drawing her into the bedroom, closing the door, and performing the sexual act with her in such a rough manner that her body felt beaten, with the weight of her breasts and warmth crushing her. This is sensuous, nay, sensuous imagery, candid and inhibited. The reader would enjoy this imagery because of its very candor. Next is style and language. The assertion of the self against the various given social roles, identities, and communal demands is an indicator of this existentialist leaning of the poet. The first person narrative of the poem also reinforces the idea of asserting self. The use of the indefinite article, which is an, in the title is also indicative of an fluid but resisting and self determining position of the poet. She explains her encounter with a man. She attributes him with a proper noun, but a common noun, every man, to reflect his universality. He defined himself by the I, the surname male ego, the supreme male ego. He is tightly compartmentalized as the sword in its sheath. It portrays the power politics of the patriarchal society that we thrive in that is all about control. It is this I that stays long away without any restrictions, is free to laugh at his own will, succumbs to a woman only out of lust, and later feels ashamed of his own weakness that lets himself loose to a woman. Towards the end of the poem, a role reversal occurs as this I gradually transitions to the poetess herself. She pronounces how this I is also sinner and saint, beloved and betrayed. As the role reversal occurs, the woman too becomes the I, reaching the pinnacle of self assertion. The poem is remarkable for its compression and for the compactness of its structure, even though it contains a diversity of facts and circumstances. The rules of punctuation have here been fully observed. All the lines are almost of the same length. The words used and the phraseology show Kamla Das's talent for choosing the right words and putting them in highly satisfactory combinations. So these are the style and language of the poem. Next is tone. An introduction is an autobiographical poem by Kamla Das. It is a confessional. It has a confessional tone in its confession in its tone and modern in style. It is blunt, bitter, and straightforward. The poem is a very cryptic and epigrammatic way, dives deep into the inner chambers of mind and digs out the real self, which generally remains subdued. Next is conclusion. This is the last slide. So an introduction by Kamla Das uh, encapsulate her personality as it expresses some incidents of her life, her rejection of patriarchal norms, and her rebellion against the gender role as well. This revolt ends with the assertion of her identity by recognizing herself with I. So, this is the conclusion of the poem. I hope you have understood it very well, that what is the critical appreciation of the poem, and I hope you have understood the meaning of that, means some of the which kind of poem it is. Actually, it is a confessional poem, all in all. So thank you for now and bye to all.